All right, so we were last talking about my dad. He was sick. He had told my mom that he was going to kill her. And my mom had asked for the ability to say goodbye to her mom. And he said that she could. So my dad is now asleep in the back of the van. They're driving to Portland, Oregon, the St. John's area. And we were talking about the thoughts running through my mom's head, which of course I don't know, but I can only imagine. And I just know that I remember her saying that she loved the fact that he was sleeping, and she was just praying and hoping that when he woke up, he would have some sense and come to his senses and be normal. I know that after we got back to my grandma's, then my dad did end up spending some time in Damage Hospital again. My mom had ended up calling her, father-in-law. So she called her father-in-law, Elmer Nelson, and he had suggested that they come back and live in Kansas for a while. So that's what they did. They decided that it would be best for Steve, once he got out, to maybe just go and live near his family, and maybe that would help a lot. And honestly, in ways, I think it did. But he just came out there. He's like, you know what? Let's come out, pick you all up. You guys can come out here, live in the farm. They had like a 20-acre farm, or maybe bigger. Maybe it was 40 acres. I can't remember, but I remember it was a big farm. And that's like nothing for Kansas. That's like probably a really tiny farm. But he loved his farm. I remember when I was older, like going in the combine and sitting in the back of the tractor and pushing hay bales out for the cows. And I remember that we had to be careful for the bull. That was later in life, but he was, Elmer was pretty nice. His stepwife, Carol, and her daughter weren't very nice. My mom didn't like them. And the young one, was very spoiled. Well, so I remember my mom saying that I as well went out there and everybody kind of wanted to hold me, and I was the baby and I was a baby girl. And so I didn't have to do anything. Everybody just spoiled me rotten and they did everything for me. And my dad was kind of like that anyway. Like, he just thought that I did no wrong ever. My poor brother, sometimes I just feel bad for him because I think, he wasn't as favored as me, and it actually kind of bothers me a lot. But so we went to Kansas, and then after they left living at the farm, they moved to Clearwater, Kansas, which is like a small town right outside of Wichita. And I just remember as I was growing up, because I just started out a crawler there, and I was there until I was 7. I remember growing up being in like this cute, quaint, like neighborhood. And I remember us playing like Heads Up 7-Up. And I remember us playing tag in the neighborhood with all the kids. I remember going to a park that we had a lot of fun at. There was a lot of pictures of that. That was when my dad was really like, oh my word, Christmas is like the best. And he would tell us right before Christmas, like Christmas Eve, he'd be like, look, there is Rudolph's nose. That's when like my whole belief in Santa was just amazing because my dad showed me how, Rudolph was flying over above and Santa was coming to visit and we had to get to sleep. He had made light organs for the Christmas tree that were on the, flash the lights on the Christmas tree to musical, like a radio or a stereo. Mostly we had like record players and stuff, and my dad had hooked it up to the record player. And so I remember listening to the music and sitting by my dad and watching the lights twinkle. I remember some videos that we had done of me and Matthew putting our favorite ornaments on the tree. I remember my dad playing this game that we always played. We had a kitchen that went around into the hallway where the bedrooms were and then out into the living room, and then you could go back into the kitchen. So it was kind of like a roundabout. And he would play with us and run after us, and the door would like swing. And so we'd come out of it and he'd go, rah! And we'd scream and run the other way. And then he'd hide and then he'd, rah! And it was so much fun. Dad was a lot of fun. He always was playing with us. He always played games with us. He told us stories. And one of the stories that he told us was about what happened at the cherry orchard. And what happened was when my brother was in that van from the story I told you before, he was with him and he said, yeah, I couldn't see anything driving down that road. But Matthew told me exactly where to go. And I'm like, I think about it now. And back then when my dad told the story, I was just like, oh, that's so awesome. I never even thought twice about it. But of course, I was a child when I always heard it. And just the way that he always said it was just like, wow, Well, I think about it now and I'm like, how could that even be possible? But it had to be possible because he's alive. Matthew's alive. Like, he found his way. My dad could not see. And my brother was like, Dad, turn here. Dad, turn there to Mike's house. All the way to Mike's house. And I mean, he made it. So I think about that and I'm just like, it's kind of like must have been like God helped him or something, because I don't think a 3-year-old normally could do that. But my brother is very good at like navigating. I, on the other hand, can barely make it out of a paper bag. Like, I go into a hotel and Gus always laughs at me because I go in one way and I come out and I want to go the exact opposite way that you're supposed to go to get out. I just never find my way out of anything. Like, I always use navigation. If somebody, if I went to a place once, that doesn't mean that I can get there the next time. Or even the next time. Takes me quite a few times. I think about it sometimes like, man, my dad did so good there, and they had good jobs. I remember my mom decided to go to work. My brother and I had a babysitter, but my mom did not like it there, and she didn't have any friends there. She had a few friends, but not her mom and her sister and her family, and she really missed them. She missed being in Portland. She missed the Pacific Northwest. So we did move back before my 8th birthday and into the house that my dad flooded with the cats. Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, man, I wonder if my dad would have, if there was a different path, would it have been different? I don't know. I mean, I can't say, but my dad, I don't remember him ever having a mental issue there. But wait, he did. He did. That's right. Because when I was 3 years old, that is when my knees swelled up like softballs. And me and my mom and my brother were walking down the street. Well, always the first part of that story was, I'm totally just remembering this. The first part of that story was always to everybody else was, yeah, so our family was taking a hike and my daughter's knees swelled up like softballs. Later, I heard the true story, and my dad had gotten sick again. And for some reason, like, Elmer wasn't there to help. It's just like, oh my goodness, my memories are popping back up. And he was gone. And my mom, something about the car had broke down. They were in the car, they weren't near home, and they were walking, like walking and walking. And my dad was gone, and she didn't know where he was. Of course, no cell phones back then. And I was 3 years old and I was walking. And my mom couldn't carry me the whole time, so I was walking, and she turned around and I said, Mommy, my knees are hurting. And she looked at me, and my knees were as big as softballs. And back then, I was stick skinny. Like, my legs were bird legs. Like, my family members said, oh my goodness, that girl has bird legs. Like, insy bincy, tiny legs. And so my knees were like ginormous. So if you can imagine it being like sticks with like a huge softball, my knees were ginormous. So I don't know how we got back. I don't know what happened after that. I don't know if my mom like called somebody. There's a lot of breaks in the story that I don't really know about. I do remember like pictures of me in a crib, and I was in the hospital, and they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And that's when they did my first exploratory surgery on my arm, on my elbow. They didn't find anything, but like my mom was so upset because they were like jerking on my arm and I was crying. And the doctor was like, no, if you just force it straight, it will go straight. Oh, yeah. He was like trying to do that. Well, I also remember that was the time when I had to wear these like they would make a cast and they would go all the way up, and they would put these rubber bands, and I had to have these casts on both my legs. I always remember my brother coming in, and he hated that I wore those casts, and they hurt. And I used to like be like, Matt, my legs hurt so bad. And he would just take those casts off and throw them. And he hated them. He hated that I had to wear them. And of course, my parents were thinking they were doing the right thing for me, and they weren't like trying to be mean, but this is what the doctor says. So this is what you do, and so they always put those casts on me every night. When a child is sleeping with casts on, honestly, it is hard to sleep. And I remember that kind of torture. But, I do remember a lot of my dad being like so gentle and kind to us kids. I remember him being just so much fun. But then there was times when like he could be so nice and so great one minute, and the next minute he was just mad and angry. So I was just telling my sister-in-law the story. So after they went to the hospital, they did surgery on my arm. They didn't find out anything. My mom said, that looks like rheumatoid or that looks like arthritis to me. And then the doctors did a blood test, found out that I had rheumatoid arthritis. And they just didn't think that because I was so young. Sure enough, I did have it, and a free-flowing cell, which means that it could have affected my organs at any time, and that is death sentence. So anyway, my poor parents, all the things that they had to go through and struggle with, but I remember being at a restaurant, and my mom and dad were sitting across from me, and my brother was sitting next to me. And I remember looking at my dad, and I'm like, I don't want to take that medicine, because they were trying to finally giving me for the first time medicine that had, and I believe I was 5 years old at this time, but medicine that had to help me with my arthritis, but I had to swallow it. I couldn't chew on aspirin anymore because it was wrecking my teeth. And so I was sitting there, and I was like, I'm not taking this. I am not taking this. Like, no, I can't swallow pills. Like, we're just going to have to figure out another way. And my dad looked at me, and he was like, you take that medicine right now, or I will shove it down your throat. And sure enough, I grabbed that medicine, and I threw it in my mouth. I gulped it down, and well, I was able to take medicine ever since. Not that I would recommend that, because it was a traumatizing experience, but that's how they got me to take my medicine, I guess. But for the most part, other than those kind of things, my dad was a very lovable, caring, kind. He hated that I had to go through it. In fact, he would get in fights with my mom that she would be like, no, she can wash the dishes. And my dad was like, she doesn't need to wash the dishes. She's hurt. My mom was like, no, Sarah can wash the dishes. And there was many times I'd be like, oh, Mom, I can't wash the dishes. And she was like, oh, really? Because you were just doing something fun like a few minutes ago, and your legs were fine. And then I was like, oh yeah, darn, So often there was pictures of me washing the dishes. I remember washing the dishes, like getting on a chair and standing up on my knees. And my problem is all of a sudden the forks and knives were dolls, and they were swimming. And yeah, it took me a long time to do the dishes, but my mom waited it out. She was always like, nope, you can do it. That really helped me in my life. And my dad was very squishy, and for the most part, it wasn't all bad. I definitely wanted to show you that, just because he was scary and mean, he wasn't always like that. So it's not like my mom would just be like, why did she stay? Well, because there was more times that he was pleasant and fun and engaging and loving and a great dad, always a great dad. He was good to her. And he was incredibly intelligent, and he was so engaging, and he just made you feel like you were the best person on earth. These are all kind of the things that kind of bring you aware to what, here's this part of the Santa Claus story here, and a lot of these were in Kansas. Here was right before was a calm before the storm, because for the most part, other than when I was 3, which was a very short period of him getting sick again that I remember, because I ended up in the hospital, so I just don't remember it. Maybe Mom dealt with it behind the scenes, but because I wasn't involved, and I don't remember when I was 3 either. Anyway, my brother might remember when he was 3, but I don't. And I just feel like a lot of Kansas, like going to the park and playing with my friends. And I remember going to school for the first time. And I remember, I was in there, my desk, and all of a sudden my eyes, because I ended up getting uveitis and I couldn't see all the lines. I went up to the teacher and I'm like, you know what? I don't know what to do, but I can't see the lines on my paper. And she was like, what do you mean, honey? And I was like, I can't write in between the lines because there is no lines. And that was the first time they realized that the arthritis had affected my eyes, which made my mom really nervous because she thought that it was going to affect my organs then after that. So that was a lot. And I know that's one reason why she wanted to move back home was my grandma was so helpful and she liked my grandma in my life, our life. And my grandma was very good for us. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a good image of my father because, of course, the stories are more dramatic and, you know, this was my 1970s childhood. So think of 70s houses in a cute little neighborhood and the kids could run down the street. We could play hide and seek until dark and we could go out and do whatever we wanted. And you didn't have to worry about your next door neighbors. You know, maybe you did, but we didn't. Like, we had good neighbors. We enjoyed our time there. And for the most part, everything was good. I'm sure my mom had a lot more to deal with than me, but for me, I don't really remember that much bad there. It was pretty good. And I remember I felt like I came back to the Pacific Northwest and the storms hit and the divorce happens and the cats are gone and the dogs are gone and it's a whole new life. And it's just, nothing was the same. And sometimes I felt like I blamed my mom. Like, if we never would have moved home, then maybe things would have been better. Or when I'm a wife, I'm going to be a better wife so my husband isn't like this. And that's such a strange thing for a child to think. But that's what I thought. I remember thinking that. And I remember praying as a little kid, like, I want my husband to be like this. I want my husband's family to be like this. And I had all this stuff written down. Some of it came true, some of it didn't. But God is amazing, and I love him so much. And I'm so thankful that he put it on my heart to do these life stories. And I will definitely be sharing with you more. I will keep you in tune to all the nutty things because there is a lot more. A lot more. It doesn't seem possible, but there is.